Hello, and welcome to another fully live news episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Kody Kinzie. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and where's the bold man, as they said in our YouTube comments? Killian is still gone. He is out sick today. I knew he would be back, so I was very excited and got ready to do the stream earlier, only to find out that he is sick. So, I took an hour to grieve for Killian, and here we are going live a little bit later than usual. But if you're on Pacific time, then, just right. So, hello, James. Good to see you. I have a lot of different news to go through this week. Also, I, of course, want to give a shout out to our guest on the last stream. Angelina did a great job of breaking down what she's passionate about, which is basically hacking things that fly of all sorts. She's working on a variety of different workshops, including a satellite hacking workshop, a drone hacking workshop, and now an airplane hacking workshop. So definitely check those out because she did a great job. And if you missed last week's stream, I think we're going to start doing cutouts again. So a while ago, we were actually, oops, am I still sharing my screen? Yes, I am. Was trying to find Angelina's, like demonstration. We talked about all sorts of stuff that Angelina is going to be working on. And if you want to check out the replay, I will put it up once I find it. So you can check it out and also put it in the chat because she did some cool demonstrations on things she covers in her classes. There we go. I'll put that back up again and post this in the chat. So anyway, lots of stuff to go over this week. One of the things I particularly enjoyed was the class that I did at the Missoula Makerspace. So we were teaching beginners how to get started with soldering using these cute cat-shaped PCBs that our friend Angelina actually designed. So that's one of the things she was talking about because she was working on a workshop too. And it was really cool because the library has these programs for the makerspace that are just for the community, for people to get started with electronics if maybe they've wanted to, but they haven't gotten the chance to. And we had a pretty big age range come to the class. We had some people who were retired who were like talking about how they wish they'd gotten into it earlier, and also some people who it was their first time and they were considering a career in doing it. So really, really cool, lots of fun, and big shout out to Angelina for making that all possible. All right, here's a question. Have we tried the new Apple laptops for hacking yet? No, not yet. So I can't go too much into it, but let's just say that this laptop I got fairly easily when I first joined Varonis a while ago, and it's an Intel-based Mac. So I do a lot of like security testing, and I also have some decent security enhancements and like hardening on this laptop. But getting a new laptop through my company has been a little tricky, especially with like, having to lock it down in certain areas, then not being able to use certain things. So we will see if I end up getting a laptop that is the new version for testing, because I've really been looking forward to it. And I requested kind of not too beefy of a laptop, but one that I can test the things that you guys are asking about and actually maybe like try out some of these large language models or some of these attacks that are designed to go, well, maybe not attacks, maybe in the virtual environment, but like some of these techniques that target the newer Apple silicon. So yeah, I'm really excited to try that out if I do end up getting access to it, and we will see if I get one to play with. All right, so here's the big question I was expecting. Any thoughts on the MGM hotel hack in Las Vegas? So if you guys have been on the stream for a while, then let's see. None of these names are new. We've been talking about these ransomware groups and the fallout from some of the big events that they've had that give them lots of access to all these big companies in the past year, in the past 2 years. So we on the stream know these kind of names really, really well. And their playbook is always the same because it makes money. It's very smart. If you have access to data, you go after that data, you steal that data, and then you encrypt everything that you find, including as many backups as you can to make it so that they are in a real pinch and can pay for two different things, keeping the data from being leaked and also getting the data to get back up and running. And these are probably the examples that are going to be cited from now on for like what the cost is for not paying a ransomware group. So we have, what's really interesting here is like a control case. So we have a case A and a case B, two different hotel groups that get hit, Caesars and MGM, and they have the same choice ahead of them. They can pay for deletion of the data and also restore their system so they're back up and running, or they can say no and attempt to restore and just basically not negotiate with terrorists, as it were, and stay the course and try to get around having to do that. The impact is, like, for one, maybe the company that pays the criminals gets in trouble. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not law enforcement, so I don't know exactly what the rules are around that, but it seems bad to encourage generally cybercrime. But in terms of impact, it certainly seems as though Caesars has put out like an announcement, which we'll go through later on the show, that's saying like, okay, like we paid for deletion of the data and we've done our best to verify it, but we can't be sure that it was, like it was actually deleted. We'll be reaching out to everybody to let you know. And it's a pretty measured response. Of course, it also means that one of two things happen. Either they paid to prevent the mayhem that's currently happening at MGM properties, or the hackers never had access in the first place, or this is another possibility. They had access, they ransomwared it, but they had excellent backups to the point that the backups were immediately back up and running and nobody noticed really the disruption that the ransomware attack caused. That is entirely possible with like excellent people in place and really good redundancies and stuff like that. So it might just be that these two casinos were in different places to start from. So it's really difficult to say exactly what happened here yet as all the information comes out. But it does seem that it is exactly lined up with the playbook we have seen with these ransomware groups, which is this: an initial access broker, somebody who focuses specifically on getting into systems and doesn't really follow up after that. They turn around and kind of sell that to a larger player. That kind of relationship of these lower level cybercrime gangs that focus on like business compromise or like other sorts of social engineering attacks that get them in the door can then turn around and sell that for a lot of money to people who know they can exploit it for tons and tons of different like ways of extorting cash from the situation. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out, because as of the news today, it still seems like things are pretty disrupted in Las Vegas. So yeah, we'll go through some of the stories on that, but it is entirely within the playbook of the ransomware gangs to get access, exploit it, and then like kind of turn the screws as much as possible to cause as much pain and as much public incentive to pay the ransom, because the ransomware gangs don't get paid while the customer is getting tortured. Like they can only increase the pressure to pay, but if if MGM already has a plan to get through this and they've like made the calculations and they're just like, it's just not worth it, let's just not pay these people, like we have a plan for moving on, it's going to be painful, but we know how much we're going to lose and we'll make it back. Like that could be the plan. And in that case, then it might be the more, I guess, like anti-crime approach to like not reward the people who just like struck you, if you know exactly how much it's going to cost to get back on your feet. So I guess that's the really big question. So yeah, I mean, casinos have legendary security around the things that make them money. So James points out, like, could you really restore backups that fast? Like warm servers ready to roll? It's like, if there was enough of a concern about this sort of activity, if somebody got really sold on like a presentation at a cybersecurity conference and they were like, look, like we are never going to have this problem. And like, we're going to make it so that even if the worst thing happens, we're ready to go live the next day. And they know these ransomware gangs and like maybe they are really paying attention to like the way they operate. They're going to come up with a plan that ensures that they have a known time to be back up and making money again, like I would assume. So I think that if some of these casinos or some of these properties, if they were really excellently managed and took advantage of a lot of the things that are available, maybe that would be a possibility if they had a limitless amount of wealth to pour into that defense. And maybe it's worth it to them, because maybe they calculated that the amount of time that's down is worth just investing in that preemptively and just absorb the hit and never have to worry, not deal with unknowns. So yeah, I think it is possible that could have happened, but I think it's entirely more likely that you could just also just pay a ransom and it would be the one-time cost of that center, and then you just cross your fingers it doesn't happen again. Who knows? There's still a lot of speculation. So all right, let's go ahead and I'm gonna pop up some of these stories that we're already talking about. And one of them that I wanted to bring to the forefront, which I kind of don't like that much, I guess we'll start with, is the Google Privacy Sandbox. So I am not an expert on these things. I only know what I've read in this article and what we've talked about before on the show. And this is kind of a replacement for third-party cookies. So what it seems like to me on a high level, the impression of this is like Google's like, listen, you guys, like all you advertisers, you're messing around trying to find out this information. You're installing these cookies that are like violating privacy, and you're using it in ways that you're not telling me you're using it. So like, you guys don't get to do this anymore. I'll just tell you, like, I've decided like all the things that you need to know in order to figure out if your ads are working, and to target them. So I'll just collect that data for you and then just send you that raw data in like an anonymized fashion. So that's kind of the idea or the goal, I believe, anyway, for this privacy sandbox. And the way that it is, one could argue it's a little deceptively marketed, just because like it's not a privacy sandbox, it's an advertiser like API into your interests and like a tagging system for like learning about you. So like, privacy sandbox is a pretty generous way of describing it, I think a lot of privacy advocates would say. But this is something that is coming to your Chrome. So if you have Chrome, you can expect to see some of these features rolled out in announcements like this. And it is, a bit of a concern. So while third-party cookies really did get crazy, this is something that is a bit of a, it's very aligned to Google's interest and bottom line, I would say, when it comes to the way that it's rolled out. And it might not be as aligned towards users' privacy. The ways that it can track you are, a little bit invasive, and some of the default settings are, of course, turned on. So you'll need to go in and automatically turn those off. Yeah, so sorry, James, your question is still lingering. But yes, this is something that you can look out for in recent updates of Chrome, and you can expect it to impact the way that it collects data about you. So make sure you check out some of the privacy features to make sure that they are not turned off by default, or some of the sharing and reporting features turned on by default. And this article also has some good suggestions on how you can disable the features that leak the most data. All right, next up, this is a story that has been kind of spreading, and it sounds so similar to other stories, you guys. I kind of get that like nobody's really like too freaked out by this anymore, because it's happened so many times this year. But iPhones have yet another zero-day vulnerability that's been used as a way of loading Pegasus malware. This is something that Citizen Lab has disclosed, and they're really good at kind of trying to cover people that are targeted by this sort of mercenary spyware, and then report it to get it patched as quickly as possible. So a lot of the time, if you see like Citizen Lab involved in a disclosure, it means like mercenary spyware. Like, this is stuff where your phone could be fully patched, but if you're a VIP and you're targeted by like an unfriendly country or someone with enough money, these sorts of zero-day vulnerabilities have been trickling down and becoming less and less expensive. This one still seems like a pretty expensive one. There's a couple more articles in here that are covering this, but this is the kind of fallout from the update. It seems like this was if I remember correctly, a malicious image that was sent in iMessage that was able to exploit a device without any user interaction. So that's like a zero-click exploit, which is scary. So if you have an iPhone, especially an older iPhone, I believe Apple has like pulled some of these old iPhones out of the dust that usually would be getting security updates, and decided to provide updates to them just because of the way that these exploits trickle down. So let's say that this is an exploit that's designed for like the most recent version of iPhone. It gets patched. There's still going to be a bunch of older iPhones which are no longer supported, which might be used by people in other countries. And if you wanted to be able to hack a bunch of people's phones in that country, you could still buy these exploits on the secondary market once they lose their primary value, and be able to target, older iPhones that are still operating elsewhere, which is why it's really important that they kill this bug really soon. Yes, and okay, this is exactly what I was talking about. So yeah, if you have all these older iPhones out there operating, and you don't backport this to older phones, then yeah, you just create a market for this like reskinned exploit to continue to make money by allowing people in that country to hack each other's phones. All right, so this is really scary. There has been a lot of incentive for like utility companies to start taking, cybersecurity more seriously, as a lot of these things go online and have cascading effects if they're attacked. So this is primarily an espionage group. They're called apparently Red Fly, by whom, it changes all the time. I don't know. Oh, Symantec. There we go. So Symantec has named them Redfly, and it seems like a cyber espionage group whose main interest was maintaining access to utility companies that focus on power. So this was a 6-month operation that allowed the attackers stealthy access to information to be able to potentially load further malware, especially by doing things like loading keyloggers, which capture authentication logins and all the sorts of things that attackers would need to go deeper into the system. So just a reminder that these sorts of groups are in particular targeting utilities because of the high impact that they have. When we look at a casino being ransomware, like obviously that is a pretty bad thing for them to lose all that gambling money, but electricity is a much more serious thing. All right. So for those of us who use Linux, we know that there's a lot of these like free tools out there that are maintained by like we don't necessarily know who that do convenient things. And this could be like loading disk images or some other like pet like open source project that is just like old but still works and everybody kind of uses it. So this was apparently one of those tools that a lot of Linux users enjoy using, and this was every so often redirecting people to a malicious version of the packages they were promising to install. And instead, they were installing some pretty basic Linux malware that was like extracting information, running cron jobs, so like popping up programs every so often in a way that can't really be killed. And because they were doing this to presumably beginners, they were able to infect a fair amount of computers by having freedownloadmanager.org sometimes redirect users to a malicious Debian package at deb.fdmpkg.org. So it's unknown exactly like if this was deliberate or if this was like a supply chain hijack, because nobody has been able to contact the maintainer of this tool, which is apparently popular enough that people still use it. So kind of interesting to see here that some of these Linux tools that we just love, know and trust, that kind of like get us to where we need to go, or we might recommend to beginners, 1 out of every like 100 times or so might just redirect you to an info stealing piece of malware. So kind of I guess a Linux user horror story that just every so often, like a reputable seeming source will just turn evil and start giving you a version of the software that just infects your computer. Oftentimes we click on these downloads, and unless it's from a really trusted source, we feel a little sketchy about it. So to me, this just like takes all of those downloading websites where there's software for free, but you can obviously get them from like the source of that software. It's just like slightly more convenient. It's just not worth it to me anymore. Just the knowledge that sometimes it could just become evil just because it feels like it, and then no one would be able to contact the person who originally made the software. Like, what happened to them? Like, were they the one that was like evil the whole time? I don't know. There's too much mystery here. But either way, this kind of like kept me up when I read it, because I realized how many of these like convenient Linux tools I use that maybe if they just turn evil like 1 time out of 100 would really have an impact on my system. Okay, so speaking of utility companies, CISA is practically begging public water utilities to take these free scans to look for internet-facing vulnerabilities that would cause them a huge headache. This is something that is available for free. So if you are one of my 25 people watching who happens to work for a critical infrastructure facility that uses waterways, then go ahead and sign up for this. Or other than that, you can just feel comforted to know that this is something that is now being aggressively pursued, where anyone who's operating one of these facilities can now sign up for a scan, which is a public scan, so they don't need to come and plug in. I was like, wow, like if this is a phishing campaign, or like like, oh yeah, let us into your facility, we'll scan around, like it's for the government. No, it's none of that. It basically just gives them the ability to send you a report of a scan that they're probably doing anyway, where they take a look at your public facing infrastructure and they figure out if anything there is critically vulnerable or has likely already been breached. So it's just more of like a reporting program, but like I honestly really like CISA. Like everything from their stickers to their outreach that they're doing seems like an agency that is really effective at identifying weak points and allocating resources where they're needed. So allowing for the sort of free scan that gives you a report of exactly what your IT department needs to work on, that's really nice. Like I would love to see that kind of expanded further and further, because it seems like maybe a government test of the utilities, if you already know what's vulnerable, and like a letter grade to know that like your local like water like department or whatever is getting an F, because they have like 5 like burning fires that they refuse to put out, like on a cybersecurity kind of way. That would be good to know for a transparency sort of thing. Who knows? But either way, at least it's being offered now for free to these agencies, and it's a lot easier for them to take advantage of early warning systems for these sort of cyber attacks. All right, alarming and also predictable. I don't know. Like I seem to remember a lot of Acrobat and Reader 0-day exploits to the point that I like always hesitate to open PDF files. Just like always, it's just burned into my brain. So every time I see a Adobe Acrobat or Reader vulnerability, I get concerned. Now the good news is I feel like most people maybe don't use Acrobat to open PDFs anymore, and they open in something else. So maybe this won't have the biggest impact as I initially thought. But just another thing to keep in mind if you are someone like me that loves to kill the Adobe updater, maybe let it go through today. I have a couple programs on my computer that let me know. Oh, sorry, James, your comment is still lingering up there. Oops. There you go. You're free. I release you. Yeah, so I have a number of different programs on my Mac that tell me when a program is trying to like install like a cron job, or like start every time my computer starts, and I'm always just like, no, Adobe, you can't do that. I don't want you to, like, I don't even want you on here except for like one thing. So yeah, if you're like me and you do that, then feel free to let the Adobe update go through today, and you'll be a little bit safer. Okay, this was a pretty short cycle. I believe it was 2 months ago. We were talking about Team Fisher. This was a open source tool that had been released to demonstrate something that Microsoft refused to fix. So, or I think in this article, it generously says that they declined to fix it at the time. So, yeah, what was interesting about this was it allowed you to kind of pop up and look like you were on the same like team as someone, like within the same company, and send them information that would cause them to then open a malicious file and give you access to all sorts of stuff. It didn't take long for Teams Fisher, this publicly available tool, to be used in basically exactly that. So looks like this was exploited by APT29, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. And as soon as they saw this tool, they thought it was great and decided to use it to attempt to do some phishing attacks while posing as somebody within the organization. Microsoft has suspended the accounts affiliated with the attack, but still a pretty short cycle to the researcher being like, hey, this is a problem. Microsoft being like, that's not really a problem. And then the researcher being like, all right, well, if that's not a problem, then here's this free tool to do that thing. And good luck, everyone. And then like 3 months later, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service doing exactly that thing. So, all right, that was a pretty short cycle on that. Okay, next up. This is concerning for me. As I recently mentioned, I have an Intel-based macOS system, and this MetaStealer program has been appearing in the wild, and it appears to be a masked. So it's a Go-based program, but when you encounter it, I believe it is disguised as an application. Oh, as a PDF, right? So if you are leery of that PDF, then you now have 2 reasons. 1, you might get infected by the 0-day in Adobe Acrobat, or 2, it could be a disguised PDF, which is actually a Go binary, which will infect your computer. So, okay, that's cool. Not much of a disguise because it's a .app file, but Mac users, sure, whatever. So it looks like this is a DMG file, which will go ahead and infect your computer with spyware primarily. It's got Mac stealer capabilities. This is an older version of malware that has kind of impacted Mac before. In this case, it is limited to Intel-based Apple computers and not Apple Silicon, as it's called. So if I do get that updated macOS system, then I will let you know if this has evolved to stock it as well. But either way, I'm already frightened of PDFs from the internet, and I will just open them in like a cloud environment, typically like Google Drive or something. So I don't know. I don't know if I would fall for this one, but it seems as though it's something you do need to keep your eye out if you have an older MacBook like I do. This was mostly a reminder to myself. All right, so another thing that is very popular for mercenary spyware groups to go after is Firefox. So browsers obviously are pretty universal. They're used on computers all over the world, and this was a 0-day that was actively exploited in an attack. So that means this is something you need to update if you are using Firefox and holding off on an update, because as I said, these exploits don't go away. They just start becoming cheaper and cheaper and more widely used as they affect like fewer and fewer computers. So if you're one of those computers that hasn't updated, then eventually it could come for you. So this is the WebP code library version. This is typically also going to be like you'll get sent a malicious link or get redirected to a malicious link somehow, and that will allow something to load through the browser, which is able to then infect your computer. So yeah, another example of mercenary spyware twice in a week, making news for having another platform need to be rapidly patched to avoid these sorts of spyware groups. All right, so this one is, I'm going to give you guys a spoiler. It's probably North Korea. So we have CoinX, a cryptocurrency exchange, which had a Lazarus-style attack go on, which has now frozen the entire platform. So it looks as though there were a bunch of unauthorized transactions of currencies that I have heard of only one of. I didn't know that Tron was real, and Polygon is new to me, and its symbol makes no sense. So if you're into cryptocurrency, which by the way, crypto means cryptozoology, then please explain that in the comments. Anyway, that aside, CoinX hasn't really talked much about the attack, but it looks like some of the attacks that North Korea has pulled off before. They are very good at this and highly motivated to use cryptocurrency because it allows them to get around sanctions. And as a result, they're some of the best at these sorts of attacks. So it looks like the losses from this attack are about $43 million. It looks like they've also shut down their entire exchange, so it's not currently possible to be able to move money through their system or whatever the equivalent of Tron is. But yeah, currently pointing towards a Lazarus heist, and the statement so far from the group that was impacted here says that they are working with other exchanges to limit the amount of money that is able to pass through like other exchanges. So basically trying to make it so it's harder for them to mix up all these coins and make it like difficult to trace in further steps, like mixing the coins with like other coins and trying to like make it so that they can cash out eventually. The hard part, of course, of a heist like this is actually turning it into real money and like cashing it out. So we'll see how exactly that part is going to go. All right, so you know what? You can't get phished on Microsoft Teams if it's down. This was reported on September 13th, so that a couple of days ago now. But Microsoft Teams was down, thus protecting everybody from this potential phishing attack. So a little bit of mixed news. This seems like it was not an attack; it was merely like an incident, but it was reported, so worth mentioning. If you weren't getting your Teams messages, then it was not your fault, nor was it an attack. All right, so this one was a little concerning. I understand now that the iPhone 12 is a couple generations back, but apparently during safety testing, France discovered that the iPhone 12 is actually radiating too much radio energy for French energy absorption safety standards. So that means that they're demanding that this is either fixed with some sort of update that limits the amount of power, or otherwise has some sort of modification make it so that it is not emitting so much radiation. So I am not an iPhone user, nor am I in France. However, it is worth noting that if you have an iPhone 12, then maybe wait for that update before holding it too terribly close to your face. All right, so this is an interesting like national security event. So the Manchester police officers data exposure here is actually a third party. So it's the United Kingdom's Greater Manchester Police, GMP, is the organization that's impacted here, but it was not them that was actually attacked. This was actually a third-party provider of services for a number of different UK organizations, them included. But because it involves like police employee information, they're treating it as like a much more serious event. So yeah, these ransomware affiliates kind of don't know what they're getting into sometimes when they start hacking managed service providers or other groups that have a lot of data that could potentially be like very sensitive information. So in this case, it definitely seems as though they hit a nerve here with the information of police officers in the UK, and they are allocating a lot more resources towards it than they might if it was some other organization. All right, so it was also reported that there was a attack by Iranian hackers that was basically a password spray attack. So this is a pretty common attack. It's not super sophisticated. It just means that they suspect that you're probably using the same passwords across a bunch of different accounts. So if you have information that's breached, if some information gets bought and sold on the darknet that allows them to maybe affiliate passwords with users, they can launch these automated attacks where they attempt to log into all these different accounts using these known passwords or variants of them. Now, if you don't have 2FA, then that makes it really easy for them to get in. And even if you do have 2FA, it lets them know they have a correct password and they are ready to move on to the next step of exploitation. So Refined Kitten is probably one of my favorite names for one of these groups. This is a cyber espionage group, and it seems like they're also targeting especially organizations in the United States with these like password spraying attacks. Okay, here we go. We're finally there. So Caesars is currently operating. I believe you can check in there. You can play the slots, and that seems to be because they have paid a ransom in order to protect information around their loyalty program. At least that is the implication here. So they're still investigating the extent of any additional personal, otherwise sensitive information contained in the files acquired by the unauthorized actor. But it looks like this was a ransomware attack where they had the exploitation, they stole the information, and then Caesars paid a certain amount to attempt to shut down the consequences of this, and it seems somewhat successfully so far. So the statement is specified that the data breach only impacts the loyalty program members. So this is not like anybody that's ever played slots or they stayed there. This is loyalty program members only. But that's still like a very, very large list. So yeah, it's kind of unknown exactly what is going on with their IT side, like whether they were subjected to the ransomware attack or if they were only able to just like exfiltrate data. Kind of from the statement, looks like they're implying that they were only able to exfiltrate data. So again, still a lot of speculation here about like these casinos getting hit at roughly the same time and reacting in different ways. If they had no risk of their floors being shut down and it was only to keep their member data private and minimize their role, then like maybe they were also never in the same position as MGM was. So that's something also to consider. And Las Vegas is not the only place that is under a cyber attack right now due to ransomware. If you are a Kiwi, then you might also not be able to get around Auckland because of the inability to top up your transit cards. So it seems as though the service behind the metro there is not able to like add any like currency to your like tap cards or whatever the service is called. My AT or Hop. Oh, Hop, right? You hop on. Got it. That's cute. But either way, like it seems as though people are not able to like do financial transactions online. They're not able to top up at stations. So it seems generally like a difficult time getting around. Obviously, they're saying that they're going to have leniency for people using public transit if they're not able to appropriately add fare. But it definitely seems like an ongoing problem when a transit agency isn't able to collect money. That's like one of the things it absolutely needs to do in order to continue operating. So being unable to collect fare for too long is obviously going to have a devastating impact on their budget. All right, so over to MGM. So it looks as I love that they have fully committed to AI generated art on Bleeping Computer. It is so funny to me how like unique and kind of unhinged like the the headline images get each week. We're living in a better future when it comes to the art on Bleeping Computer. All right, so the most interesting fact about this is mostly that it was hypervisors that were targeted in this attack. They just encrypted like 100 hypervisors, and there doesn't seem to be any way of restoring them. That seems to be what's causing a lot of these problems. The identity of the attackers here, or rather, like the group that they're operating in, is already known to us just because they've been involved in so many other attacks. They will go after basically anyone, and they're very good at this. They've been doing it for a good amount of time, and they've already had people going after them for quite some time, and they're still here. So typically, whenever one of these groups like hits someone really big, where they make like international news and like a task force gets set up, they'll like kind of like dissolve and like rebrand under a different name and whatever, and kind of like obscure their involvement, because that's kind of the thing about these groups is they're able to like like disband and like pop up under a new organization name. So kind of feel like after something like this, maybe they're in for a rebrand just because of how much publicity it's getting. But it looks like, again, double exploitation attack. Ransomware was deployed against these hypervisors, which broke down operations, and MGM data was also exfiltrated, and they're threatening to release it. So let's see. The attackers are also saying that the only action they saw from MGM in response to the breach was disconnecting all their Okta sync servers after learning that they had been in their Okta agent for quite some time. Seems like the attackers are talking pretty openly about like the attack and what their side of it is like, and MGM is not really communicating with them or attempting to negotiate a ransom. Statement from the attackers was, after waiting a day, we successfully launched ransomware attacks against 100 ESXi hypervisors in their environment on September 11th after trying to get in touch but failing. This was after they brought an external firm for assistance in containing the incident. Also, people keep saying scattered spider, but we're talking about a whole network of people that do like initial access, and then like like the actual ransomware affiliate, and then the people above them who like actually make the ransomware. So there's a whole like group of people who could do the initial access and be a part of this breach that are not the ones who are making the original like ransomware here. So there's like a whole cybercrime environment, and I would say that this is my winner for most confusing graph of the week, mostly because it's on like a mountain peak, and that to me is far more confusing than if this was just, I don't know what Mandiant's going with this, but anyway, so we see there's some sort of connection here between Lapsus, and then somewhere they meet in the valley and have some sort of meeting. I don't know what this graph means, but anyway, so yeah, that's pretty much all I know and all I've seen about the breaches. I first saw this on TikTok as well. I think this was my first piece of like major cybersecurity news, where I follow a couple, because I'm in Las Vegas for DEF CON and everything. Like I follow a couple like Vegas local channels that go and like explore properties and interesting things about Las Vegas, and they were the first ones who were like, this is going to be huge news. Like I've never seen this in my life. Like everything is down. If this is down like this, it means that this is a much bigger deal than has ever happened before, with like a couple things like going down by accident. This is like an actual attack. So I have to credit like TikTok with like tipping me off to this attack happening days before I saw it on any other media. Like obviously like hackers were talking about it, but like I'm not really on Twitter that much anymore, so I kind of like missed it in terms of like some of the stuff I typically would have heard. So yeah, it was definitely interesting to see this reported locally and have locals be the ones who were like freaking out and trying to spread the story across social media before I saw it on a number of other platforms. All right, sorry, I was reading the chat just a little bit. I am not a virtual machine expert. I think that computers that are not physical are spooky and weird. I understand that they have utility and that they exist, and I acknowledge that, but I do not understand them. All right, so if you are like me and you enjoy using Bing's AI chat, then you were probably freaking out yesterday because you weren't able to use it because it was down. I have since attempted to replicate this, and now I have too many windows. Oh, is this Bing? No, that's not Bing. But I asked earlier to see how Bing was feeling, and Bing has indicated that it is fine and it is fully functional and it is ready to go. So I asked a couple questions. So if you haven't tried the like AI like Bing Copilot thing, it's really cool. Like it's one of the only AI platforms that's able to pull data in real time and process it. Although it starts to invent some weird stuff eventually, I did find it to be more accurate than Bard. I asked it who runs the little group of content creators that I am in charge of, and it made up like 6 people who have jobs that we should probably actually have on our team, but like I've never heard of those people before. So there still seems to be some hallucination with some of these AI tools. But yeah, one of the big problems is these tools will give recommendations and the links will be like down or dead or 404'd. I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, but like you'll ask it for like a link for something and you'll click on it and try to follow its source and it'll just be dead. Like the link doesn't go anywhere. This is with like some of the Google provided ones. This is with Bing, like AI chat as well. So it seems like they've had some problems keeping these services up and running. Maybe because a lot of people are using them, or maybe just because some of the parts of the infrastructure are having a hard time scaling or keeping up with demand. But either way, I have seen some issues with the Bing like AI chat. I personally use it a lot for like refining things or like doing quick research. So anytime it's down, I am annoyed. Although there are some good alternatives like perplexity.ai. All right. So this is a huge fine. TikTok was slapped with a $368 million fine in Ireland over child privacy violations. This was after it was found that they were processing their data in ways that was deceptive and keeping a lot of the child profile settings public, making it possible for all their content to be visible to everyone inside and outside the platform. So a lot of people whose children might be using TikTok thought that by having a child account, it would limit the impact and spread of the videos that child might post, but instead it was defaulting to public visibility and making it so they were essentially posting all those videos publicly on the internet on a platform that's kind of like YouTube, where you could just search it and find it on a browser. So that also allowed for people to contact the child directly. So imagine then like a child getting an account, marking it as a children's account, creating a video, having it go on to the internet at large, having an adult in a browser see that, and then through their TikTok account be able to contact that child. That was kind of the problem with this whole default setup. So TikTok has been ordered to pay a bunch of money, address a lot of the privacy issues by making sure that those profiles default to private, and also having it be substantially more difficult to contact children on the internet, on their platform. That was, again, kind of the issue. So from now on, they will have to make it so that family members are able to contact the children and perhaps friends, but like not random adults that like see the content like through like a browser. All right, so this brings me back to my days working in transportation logistics. The Federal Motor Carrier Administration, or the FMCSA, as us former truckers say, had to step in to provide waivers because a transportation logistics provider, Orbcom, was hit by a ransomware attack that managed to wipe out their ability to do most of their records digitally. So there are regulations in transportation logistics that mandate that paper records can only be used for a maximum, I think, of like 5 days out of every like so many days. So the FMCSA had to jump in and issue a waiver allowing truckers to use paper logs until services restored no later than September 29th, which is coincidentally the date that Orbcom said that they intend to have the system back up and running, the last possible day. So yeah, so this is having a big impact on truckers in general. Well, and of course anybody that relies on logistics through this. People who are shipping their goods have not been able to keep track of their shipments as they are progressing. So while it seems like shipments are going out, it seems like it is very, very difficult to actually track the progress of those shipments, and that paper logs have had to be like defaulted back to while the ransomware negotiations are going on. All right. So next up, and we're almost out of time. We've got a little bit more time. Google is paying a $93 million lawsuit in California over tracking. So if you've gone through your tracking settings in your Android phone and you have turned tracking off, um, that is not actually like disabling tracking. So even though they had disabled tracking of location, it was actually able to use location history in the device settings. Um, let's see. I want to get this correct. Oh yeah. So Android users were kind of like deceptively told that turning off location history in their device would completely disable location tracking. But another account setting known as web and app activity was enabled by default. And that actually allowed all the like Google apps and things on your phone to report activity back, including information about your location. So while the phone might, maybe like stop reporting back its like, physical location or like logging it deliberately, it did not disable all of the like mandatorily installed applications that Google had on the phone reporting back your location when that setting was turned off. So that's obviously pretty deceptive, and they got in a decent amount of trouble for it because it seemed as though a reasonable person would assume that flipping that switch would say, "Hey, I don't want my location tracked whatsoever," when in fact there were buried menu settings you needed to go and to activate in order to make sure that Google wasn't still finding a backdoor to like get permission to exfiltrate that information. I said, "Okay, Google," and it started recording. Creepy. All right, and last one I have. This is a so all right, little hot and cold with Google today. Google has agreed to extend security update support for Chromebooks for a decade, which is pretty impressive. Like usually you get like a 2 or 3 year pledge. Like adding an entire decade of security to your protection that you're providing for Chromebooks is a pretty big step. So yeah, so obviously everybody knows what Chromebooks are. They're inexpensive laptops that are running Chrome OS. They're super popular in schools and they're often very low cost. So you'll tend to see them in places where more expensive computers just would not be possible. Making sure that they continue to receive security updates is obviously critical because if you abandon those platforms, they they just don't perform well. They're really easy targets for malware, and it makes it easy for them to be used as botnets and all sorts of unfortunate things. So mostly positive notes here for Google to committing to not abandoning and thus creating like a giant botnet out of all these old Chromebooks for the next 10 years. All right, so that is all of the news I have this week. There's obviously a lot going on. I wasn't on last week, and Killian is still out, so there will be the return of Killian, I believe, next week. So hopefully he's feeling better soon. And also, I just wanted to give a couple of shout outs to things I've done this week. If you're interested in some Wi-Fi hacking reading, I also went through one of my favorite papers by Matthew Van Hoff, an excellent Wi-Fi security researcher, and I talked a little bit about what the most interesting ways that you can attack Wi-Fi networks with beacon frames are. So if you want to check this out, I'll drop the link in the chat and also in the description. It's just a little something I wrote up, and I'll probably be doing some more research around of how you can use beacon frames to make it so devices can't talk to each other. So basically denial of service attacks. You can make devices deplete their battery really quickly and get really hot. You can prevent messages from being delivered. So another kind of denial of service attack. And you could also do silencing attacks that allow you to either lower the power or use what's called a quiet element to make it so devices nearby won't speak. So these are like really cool, modern, interesting Wi-Fi attacks that are pretty simple with how they work. If you want to check out more, I will post this in the chat right now and then also in the description because it's a little bit of personal Wi-Fi research that I'm getting started with as I'm interested in Wi-Fi hacking stuff. All right, so if you want to support the stream and if you enjoyed this, you can always go to varonis.com/KODY to see what we are running this week for other free content. The stream isn't the only thing. And of course, I typed that into nothing. Oops. This week, I believe we have a list of all the biggest cyber incidents. Ah, yes, blockbuster breaches. You can go back and watch this great webinar talking about all the biggest cyber breaches that security companies kind of like align themselves towards when they think about cyber attacks. And of course, if you follow this link, everybody knows that you like our stream and you want us to keep producing it. So it's a little way you can support us without having to do much at all. All right, so that is all I have this week. Hopefully, I'll have another co-host next week. Killian was first on a very long and deserved vacation, but now, like taking a couple sick days off. Hopefully, he feels better soon. And we'll probably have another guest next week, maybe Angelina again. So if you have any aerospace hacking questions or any questions from the stream, make sure to jump in our Discord server. Almost forgot. You can go to nugget.lol. I hope if it hasn't been suspended again. Let's find out. nugget.lol. Does that lead to our Discord server? It actually got taken down for spam before, and I don't know why. But yes, it works. Hooray! All right. So if you want to continue the conversation or have your questions answered on the next Q&A stream, which is going to be on Wednesday at 1, then you can jump on our Discord server and leave your questions there or on YouTube. All right, that's all I have for this week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and hanging out. And make sure to subscribe if this is your first time seeing it. We'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone.